You're listening to Fox City's Murder and Mayhem, your bi-weekly dose of true crime history in a small rural community of Wisconsin.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Fox City's Murder and Mayhem. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
And Gavin, we're again back.
Yep.
And now, I believe we're jumping from Oshkosh and heading over to Green Bay. Do I remember that correctly?
You do remember that correctly.
See?
Wow.
We just do this too much.
I'm really impressed. And this is the last one that I have fully written out, which doesn't mean there aren't more coming. It just means if you were like, hey, can you have one ready tomorrow? I'd be like, yeah.
Maybe not.
But by the time we do it again, I'll probably have another one.
And since we are pivoting over to Green Bay, I believe in the past you had said, so if you want to talk about it a little bit, aren't these pulled from a book or something
They are.
from Green Bay?
They are. I'm going to goof up this name. But it's something like Titletown Cold Cases or something like that. Author is Mike Knetzger, who is a police officer or was a police officer. I think he still is in Green Bay. So,
Oh, very cool.
yeah.
Well, Mike, if you listen to this podcast, we'd love to interview you about all your fun stories you wrote
that'd be
about in
cool.
your book.
Yeah. I mean, sorry if I butchered that title because working for memory. It's odd because it's Titletown Cold Cases, something like it's more words thrown together than it needs to be.
Is it a pretty prevalent, easy book to get your hands on? I assume if he's possibly still a police officer, that it's a pretty recent book.
It's actually not that recent. This book is late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's at least it's not like 60s or
No.
something. So,
I mean,
yeah.
it's not recent, but it's not super old either.
Yeah.
I mean, I was able to pick up a copy easy enough.
All right. Well, what are we talking about today?
So we're in Green Bay, and two things here. One, this is going to be a sequel to an earlier episode.
Really?
Yes. And two, it's a bank robbery story.
Nice.
Yeah.
So is it a sequel to our Bank of Kaukauna story?
No.
No? Did we have another bank robbery?
No.
Okay.
No. And I'm gonna fight to keep this from becoming the bank robbery podcast.
But
I feel like that's going to happen sooner or later, but I'm going to fight it for now. So it will not, because I have so many bank robbery stories. But I don't want to do that until we've really exhausted the Fox City stuff. No, so remember, not too long ago. I mean, this is in the last few episodes. We had an episode where a man was told to leave money in a box.
yeah, okay.
And then officers showed up and things were not very well communicated and they ended up shooting each other.
As I recall, yes, the police officers shot each other, and then on another side of the story, we had a police officer walking around without his uniform on, patrolling.
Yes.
Just all sorts of confusion.
Yes. This is a sequel to that.
Okay.
You'll see why. It's not a direct sequel. It doesn't relate to that case.
But a character from that case is going to show up.
You will see the connection here. All right. So we're back in 1931. Today we're talking about the Southside State Bank, which no longer exists, but it was at 710 South Broadway in Green Bay. Anyone familiar with Green Bay can picture where that would have been. It's July 30th, 1931. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. Several men with guns enter the bank. They order the assistant cashier, Frank Slopinski, to open the vault. Once he did, they ordered him to lie on the floor. The vault only had $7,000 in cash, which isn't terrible, but isn't great. There was no gold or securities in the vault. The men asked for more, and Slopinski said that only the head cashier had the key to the other vault. The men were angry, so they beat him, breaking his nose and his cheekbones, cutting his face, and deviating his septum. So they hit him pretty good. Other employees were hit when they failed to access the rest of the money as well. One customer walked in during the incident unaware of what was going on and ordered to the ground at gunpoint. No one inside the bank was able to call the police, but luckily, the commercial printing office across the street saw what was happening, and they called it in. 4 officers headed there immediately. And this is where the overlap kind of begins. Detective Gus Deloy, who was the man who took all that buckshot in the face and chest in the previous story.
Oh my God, he still stayed a cop after all that?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Detective Martin Burke, who was his partner, Chief Thomas Haley, and Officer Elmer Denamer. I may be saying Denamer. I don't know. Either way. As I said, Deloy had previously come up in the Kennard extortion case where he took 177 pieces of buckshot.
That is just insane.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you just chose this story so you could say that again just to blow all our minds once again. And he's still alive and still chooses to be a cop, which is just unbelievable to me.
I didn't do it intentionally. This comes out of the same book. That's why. The police parked in front of the bank, believing that the robbery was already over, because normally that's how it worked. By the time the police would get there, the robbers would be gone, because they don't stay very long.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, it was still in progress. And they parked right next to the getaway car. Machine gun bullets flew out of the bank, smashing the police car's windows. Deloy was hit in the arm and the forehead, and a piece of shrapnel entered his left eye.
Now, this is the guy that took all the buckshot?
Yes.
Oh, my God. Poor guy.
Chief Hawley took some glass to the chest. Denamer was hit in the cheek by shards of glass, but it wasn't enough to slow him down. He returned fire with his .38 and managed to hit one of the robbers in his right shoulder. The robber ran north on Broadway, leaving a trail of blood. All of the robbers managed to escape, but many eyewitnesses saw them. One robber was described by multiple people as short, maybe 5 foot tall, which is pretty short, with a medium build and dark Italian complexion. An officer was sent to Detective Deloy's home. It hadn't been that long since the family had been told that Gus was injured and possibly dead, and now they had to hear it again. Denamer rode with Deloy.
We shouldn't have laughed because that isn't funny.
Yeah,
but
it's not funny. It's the situation is funny. What happened to him is not funny. Denamer rode with Deloy to St. Mary's Hospital. Deloy was in and out of consciousness, his left eye repeatedly swelling with blood.
Oh, my God.
Chief Hawley, drove himself to St. Vincent's Hospital to have his chest looked at. Pieces of glass were stuck in odd places, but he'd be fine. This left Martin Burke in charge of the bank. Every remaining officer was called, meaning a total of about 15 men were soon at the bank. Descriptions of the bank robbers were sent out over WHBY radio.
Ooh.
Yes, which I'll stop there for a second because that jumped out at me when I read this. I was like, WHBY? And sure enough, WHBY existed almost 100 years ago. And I didn't know this, but originally they were a Green Bay station. They didn't move to Appleton until later.
Interesting.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty neat. It's like, WHBY, really? Okay. And keep in mind, this is 1931. There's not many radio stations. Radio is still relatively new. You don't turn on your car radio and listen to music a whole lot. You can, I guess. I don't even know if maybe cars didn't have radios. Maybe just houses had radios. There weren't a lot of stations, but WHBY was there. The scene was contaminated with people walking through bloodstains and kicking the empty shells around. The building was dusted for prints with little hope of finding anything. The employees were worried that Frank Slupinski was dead inside the vault, because he's the guy who was beat up pretty bad. He wasn't. They had beat him up pretty bad. At the hospital, Gus Deloy was treated by Dr. George Sen. The first step was an x-ray to reveal that the shrapnel that was behind his eye was actually a .45 caliber bullet.
Ooh.
Interestingly, the X-ray also picked up a few of 22 fragments that were missed the last time that he was in there for surgery. So there were a couple pieces of buckshot that they had not caught the first time around.
Oh, my God.
Calls started coming into the police department, establishing a timeline. At 11:16 a.m., a wounded bandit was running through the alley on 3rd Street and then turned north on Maple. 11:20, a dark Nash automobile with Illinois plates was speeding north on 12th Street. 11:23, a caller saw the bandits in a maroon Studebaker. 11:25, 2 cars were speeding north on Maple. One was maroon and the other a dark blue. They picked up the wounded bandit. They've got a description of 2 cars, and they've seen some of the men. The head cashier, E.J. Van Vonderen, arrived after the scene began to die down, and Detective Burke asked him to do an inventory to determine how much was missing. He was able to estimate that about $10,000 was missing. Later on, after he had done more thorough accounting, he found that the actual amount missing was $6,995.
So this one they got even, because wasn't the last one, the Kakana one we did, they got $20,000 and they were upset about it, right?
Yeah. This is less than the Kakana
one.
A group called the Brown County Vigilantes were out looking for the bandits, while the fire chief was in an airplane with a machine gun looking down below for the bandits. A caller claimed to see wounded men in the woods on the west side of town near Taylor Street. Burke contacted the Wisconsin Bankers Association, and they considered putting their own investigators on the case. And I'll stop there again. This is kind of like a cool thing that I don't know if people know about. The Wisconsin Bankers Association, as well as like the National Bankers Association, they had like their own private detective agency.
Oh, really? To go in and investigate these things and stuff?
Yeah, because here's like the thing. So the local police, they investigate these bank robberies. But what happens like once these bandits who are like traveling around the state or around the country, like once they leave Green Bay, what are the Green Bay detectives going to do about it? You know,
no, they don't.
They're kind of limited.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, bank robbery is not a federal crime yet. So the FBI has no interest in this. Like soon they will. Mm-hmm. Like because of all the craziness in the 1930s, that's when the FBI starts getting involved. But at this moment, they're not. The banks actually developed their own nationwide detective service where they collected photographs of known bank robbers so they could travel around and show people, like, does this look like the guy? Kind of a neat thing that...
And then I assume if they find one of these people, they just go to the whatever local police department is and say, let's go pick them up or whatever? Or how?
Yeah. I mean, the detectives, like, they would have no authority to actually like arrest anybody, but they didn't have the limitations that a police department had. You know, like they could travel freely. Yeah, they went around and they'd have like these little flip books full of known suspects and identifying things about them and things like that. So it was just kind of a cool little thing they did to kind of fill in the gap between local police and the lack of the federal police at this point. Mm-hmm. Kind of neat. Don't know if people knew that there was an actual bank detective agency, but there was.
And it makes sense. I mean, that they would do that.
Yeah.
That they were fixing a problem that the government was ignoring, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Banking like was a really weird thing because also this is 1931. So like this is like just after like the Depression hits. I don't think at this point like the FDIC existed yet either, because that's another thing that came out of the Depression was like not only did bank robbery become a federal crime, but money being insured became like a thing.
When was this happened? When did FDIC? Did you say?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know off the top?
I don't know exactly, but it was a response to the Depression, like after the banks collapsed.
Okay.
That's when it came in and money being insured became a thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what year that went into effect, but just like at this point in time, like it was a big deal for banks to track down and get their money back because there was if the money was gone, it was gone. Mm-hmm. Like there was nothing you could do about it. If your money was in that bank, you were kind of screwed.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And you think about how regulated banks are today, and it sounds like back in this era, there was just really nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, no protections, nothing for people. It was just like, I mean, I would have been putting my money under a pillow.
Right, yeah. I mean, if you had money in the bank and the bank got robbed, you're not necessarily like out that money. Like the bank still owes you the money. But if it reaches the point where the bank goes under, well, then you're probably not getting your money
back. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's understandable why some people did not trust banks. And it's not even the bank's fault. It's understandable.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The next day's Green Bay newspaper said that 2 men were arrested in connection with the bank robbery, but the report was a bit premature. 2 young men were detained for being drunk and not having a good story to explain why they were in northeast Wisconsin when they were actually from St. Paul, Minnesota. But it was very easily determined that these were the wrong men. They were much too young and just not the gangster type. But this is the thing, like...
The gangster type, I like that.
Yeah. So 2 guys from St. Paul were in the Green Bay area drunk, and that was so suspicious.
It's just that they're like, you must be the bank robber.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no reason that 2 guys from St. Paul would be drunk in Green Bay. So the newspaper had to backtrack on that one. 7 o'clock that evening, the city had their regular city council meeting, presided over by Mayor John Diener, a Notre Dame Law School graduate and World War veteran. A proposal to fund 4 additional police officers came up, as well as modernizing the police radio system. And to be clear, this was already on the schedule prior to the bank robberies. This was not a response to the bank robbery. 5 aldermen spoke out against this idea, saying the city just did not have the funds for such a thing. This greatly upset Alderman Clement Dwyer, known as Dutch Dwyer. And Dutch Dwyer was a minor celebrity because he had previously played for the Green Bay Packers.
Did you mention him in the last part of this?
I don't think so.
I feel like we talked about somebody that was a Green Bay Packer at one point in time.
I don't know. Everybody was a Green Bay Packer.
Yeah, back then, everybody in Green Bay played for the Packers.
Yeah. He went into a big speech, and he used the bank robbery as the very reason that the funds were necessary. Even if the city couldn't afford it, they should make the improvements anyway. He was persuasive, and the measure passed. It was a big step forward for the Green Bay Police Department. Not just getting the 4 additional men, but actually getting cars that could connect by radio with each other. Like, that's a pretty big deal. Like today, that seems so incredibly basic and simple, but imagine that, like going out on patrol and not until you go back to the station, having no idea what was going on anywhere else in town.
Yeah, that is so true.
Yeah. Gus Deloy was sent to the Mayo Clinic, where he was treated by Dr. George Searing. An x-ray there showed that the .45 bullet was lodged between his left eye and his skull. Removing the bullet was too risky. The eye would have to be removed. It was beyond saving. If the eye wasn't removed, the other eye could get, quote, sympathetic inflammation and begin to deteriorate as well. I don't know anything about this, but apparently the idea was that if your one eye is like terribly injured, your other eye
adjusts itself too.
Yeah, starts adjusting and goes bad because of it. I don't know if that's real, but that's what they thought would happen. Maybe it's real. I don't know.
No, I don't know.
That seems pretty bad. If you lose an eye, your other eye just starts going, but maybe.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The surgery was a success. Reportedly, Deloy recovered faster than expected, but he was an emotional wreck. Losing an eye, he thought, was going to change his life completely. His glass eye soon arrived, but did not boost his spirits very much.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same. He returned to work.
God, and he still continued on, man.
On September 1st, 1931, which is about a month and a half after this.
That guy is a trooper.
Yeah. However, the city argued that his eye meant that he wouldn't be able to do as much work as before or be as efficient, so they cut his pay by 25%.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He hired legal counsel and filed a complaint to the Wisconsin Industrial Commission. The legal papers cited Deloy's impressive record and revealed an unusual fact. Since he had been hired on as a police officer on May 1st, 1916, he almost never took a day off. Not even Saturdays or Sundays. He worked all weekends. He never took vacations. He had one time worked every single day for a 10-month stretch without a day off. Which I get the point here is to show that like this guy is like the most loyal possible officer and good. But seriously, people do not work 10 months straight without a day off.
Yeah, no kidding.
Do not do that. He, not surprisingly, wins his case at the state, and they're like, "Yeah, dude, you can't cut his pay because he got injured on the job." Like you're gonna reward this guy for getting shot by cutting his pay.
Yeah,
the state was definitely not okay with that.
It's really ballsy that Green Bay even tried to do that. Like, yeah. I mean, somebody must have looked at like and said, "Hey guys, I don't think that's really fair."
Yeah.
You know?
I get their argument because I clearly at this point he's going to be doing more desk work than anything else. Like I get it. Wow.
Yeah, but at the same time,
like,
it's
you really feel appreciated, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, after this, they changed their mind. The state said, you got to pay him, and he ended up staying a cop until he retired at age 70. So,
God, I hope nothing else ever happened to him. I hope he was never in the vicinity of any crime. Like, because it's just like he's dealt with enough in his life at this point.
So, Detective Gus Deloy, police officer for over 40 years, repeatedly shot at and hit, but going strong till 70.
I mean, he's probably got more shrapnel, has had more shrapnel removed from his body than the entire rest of the Green Bay police force combined in that period of time.
Yeah.
I mean,
it seems that way.
It's sad.
The only two suspects ever named with a possibility of being the right guys for the bank robbery were Francis Jimmy Keating and Thomas Holden, who were later involved in a Menominee, Wisconsin robbery, where some of their gang were killed in a shootout. And I didn't do a super serious look into that, but I did a little bit of a look. And like most of the bank robberies in this time period, very few people got caught, and we can never really know who did them because if they don't get caught, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I will give credit in this case that these are decent suspects. In the Kaukauna case, people were like, "Oh, it was a John Dillinger thing," and we know 100% it's not John Dillinger. Here, the Dillinger name got floated around because he was famous, so his name came up, but he was never seriously considered as a suspect. These two guys were also major bank robbers at the time, and they would have been possible. They would have been not in jail. They were actively robbing banks at this time. The fact that we know for a fact that they robbed a bank in Menominee, Wisconsin tells us that they were in and out of Wisconsin robbing banks. Do I know they were the guys? No, I have no idea. At least as far as taking a guess goes, this is a possible guess. I'll give them credit for that. That this was, you didn't pull out a name that was just not real. This is possible.
So now, maybe I asked this on the last bank robbery we did, but you've looked at some of these bank robberies. Do bank robberies typically in this era just never get solved? Because I was kind of hoping
a lot of that.
Yeah, it just they didn't really have the infrastructure to really catch these people for the most part.
Yeah, it's weird because I would say most of them either go unsolved or they know who did it, but they can't actually get the person. So John Dillinger, most famous one. I mean, dude robbed 12 banks, 20 banks, maybe more. I don't know the exact number. And we know that he did. When he was the guy, you knew he was the guy. Because he'd walk in to the bank and everyone's like, oh, it's John Dillinger. Like really obvious. Really obvious. But, most of the time, he wasn't caught initially. Like, he did a couple stretches in jail. More often than not, he was out there running around and not getting caught. So it seems pretty common to not get caught, even if they know who it is. And then a lot of the times they have no idea who it is because there's people, they're coming from all over. The bank robbers, Wisconsin had their own bank robbers who did not go on to be famous for whatever reason. But then there's like the national guys who are famous. And they're coming from Indiana, Illinois, some as far as like Oklahoma. That helps in like not being identified, and it helps in not being caught. Because if you can get in and out of the state, you're golden.
Yeah. I would imagine at this point in time, I mean, if you can come to Wisconsin, rob a bank, and then get out of the state of Wisconsin, there ain't a whole lot they can do to you,
right,
as far as catching you.
Right. Yeah, like if you're so big that people like can recognize you, then you might be in some trouble, at least down the line. But otherwise, you're pretty good. Nobody's taking pictures. Nobody's got a camera taking a picture in the bank. No security cameras. The best they can do is maybe get your license plate number. But even then, maybe you're in a stolen car. So many of these bank robberies in the 30s, you'll see that they don't know who did them, and nobody ever gets caught.
And it's crazy to me. So, well, I guess this one was only like $6,000. But the fact that somebody would think they would get 20 grand from a bank robbery, that blows my mind. That a bank would be carrying that kind of money. Yeah. But I guess back then we lived in primarily a cash society. So, I mean, that cash had to go somewhere, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, people didn't have credit cards and nothing was online banking.
Yeah.
Like if you were buying something, you either had to have cash or really good credit with that person who could trust you.
Yeah. So, I mean, inevitably, it's going to be all cash. And the banks would just be flooded with cash because they're going to have people coming in who need cash all day. Yeah. And people that are trying to get cash off their table or whatever.
Yeah. We'll explore this more when this turns into the Bank Robbery podcast. I'm going to hold off on that at least for a few more episodes, but it's going to happen.
Because what do we have, just a couple episodes left non-bank robbery, and then we just get into a whole bunch of bank robberies pretty much?
I know I've got a Green Bay story yet. I know I've got a Wyoming story yet. I don't know what else I have prepped. When I run out of stories that are like strictly Fox City stories, then Fox City is gone. It's a Sheboygan story too. Then Fox Cities is gone, and we'll return to Fox Cities whenever possible. But at that point, I think we're just gonna turn to the bank robbery
and just start doing some random bank robberies.
Yeah, if it's a bank robbery and it happened in the state of Wisconsin, no matter where in the state, I think it's gonna start coming up. I want to avoid that as long as possible because, I mean, this is Fox City's Murder and Mayhem. We should at least part of that should be accurate.
Well, and the best way to make that happen is if somebody out there knows a story that we haven't covered on this podcast. We do ask that it be how old?
I try to keep it 50 years or older.
50 years or older, so nothing, recent. But if you do have a story, send us an email at milwaukeemafia@gmail.com, and Gavin will research it and see if he can make a story out of it.
Yeah, I make exceptions on the age, but I try to keep it 50 just because of the people.
Yeah, we don't want to offend anybody or bring up ancient memories that have been buried and are not good memories for people. So.
Yeah, we're trying to wrap this up, but I'm going to throw something in now because you got that there. So I was in Brookfield last week, and that was a thing that happened. I did the presentation, told the stories. It was well received. It was a good thing. But I did have somebody come up to me afterwards, and they weren't upset. They kind of were. they were not happy that in general, and they were not accusing me of this, but in general, how glamorized mob stories are.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, 2 of these guys like were my uncles. She's like, I knew them. I knew they were not good guys, but it didn't make it any less painful when they died.
Yeah.
And so that's why I try to do this. Like, it's unavoidable. You're always going to have somebody, maybe not after 100 years, but for a while, you're going to have somebody who has some connection to it, and that's still going to have some emotional response to it. It's unavoidable.
Right.
But I try to avoid that for that very reason, because, to this person, even though their uncle, there was 2 uncles, but one of them was murdered. Their uncle had died, 50 plus years ago. They still remembered it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like something like, ooh, did you hear this story? To them, it was like a really emotional, raw thing.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of that, and I try to keep it
and
distant
I think
for that reason.
Yeah, and I think that's the responsible thing to do.
Yeah.
In 50 years is a good number because, there's probably still people around that may be affected by that, but it's going to be minimized big time.
It's going to be minimized. Yeah, like it's still going to be people, but I'd like to think that it's not so recent that it's a huge emotional toll on them.
And it's just there's going to be the number of people are still going to be much less too.
Right.
If you did a murder that was 10 years ago, that's going to be fresh on a lot of people's minds. Because,
I wouldn't do it. And we've talked about this before. Like, specifically, I'm not going to use a name. There was a person we graduated with.
Yep.
And I've said, like, we will never do that, because there's just too many people who that just destroyed them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe if we hit the 50-year mark on that, definitely, like, even though that didn't like affect me emotionally, like, I could see it. The community was crushed.
Yeah.
I avoid anything like, and that's over 20 years now. Like, I avoid this stuff because
it's funny because I happen to know the person you're talking about, and I still, I remember the day it happened. I can remember where I was when it happened.
Right.
And everything, so.
Yeah. The whole point of this was like, yes, please send in story ideas. Be aware that if it's too recent, probably won't do it.
I would say we definitely won't do it for that. But anyways, well, we've gone on long enough, I think, on this one.
Yeah.
So we can wrap this episode up. But again, if you do have story ideas, MilwaukeeMafia@gmail.com is the right place to connect for that.
Yep.
And we will be back next week. You said definitely probably a new one next week, and then...
Well, 2 weeks, right?
2 weeks, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But 2 weeks, you'll definitely have a new one. So we'll continue with the new ones for a little while yet. You may catch a rerun dabbled in at some point. So.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, we thank everybody for the continued support, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to Fox City's Murder and Mayhem. Join us in 2 weeks for another exciting episode of Murder and Mayhem.